Welcome to Free Human, a podcast where we explore the intersection of creativity, self-actualization, and the dharmic path. I'm Indigo, a dharma coach, medicine woman, and multidisciplinary artist. I guide humans through the process of remembering their true self so they can live in alignment with their soul. You are art that breathes. Your life is art. It's your intimate relationship with self and the universe. Every feeling, thought, movement, experience, and creation is your art. Your soul is singing a song, and the notes are weaving through the universe. To sing your soul song is to be free. This podcast is the fire circle in my Dharma garden, a place where we share our soul stories and medicine, nurture our curiosity, and weave our prayers into the collective. Thank you for being here. I am very grateful. Hi, friends. In today's episode, my Dharma friend and business partner, Nikki Valenti, interviews me. We had no idea what we were going to talk about. We ended up going on a non-linear journey of my life, weaving through aspects of my childhood, time as a creative director, and who I am today. We seem to be peering into the lens of what it is like to dharmically look at my life as a child who was born as a wayshower. That feels weird to say. I can tell there is deeper integration here for me. But for now, enjoy.
The first question I want to ask you, Indigo, and you can decide which direction you want to go. Do you want to go from where you are now backwards, or do you want to start at the beginning and go forward? And I find
love
that
this question.
Right? I find that to be such an interesting question from the universe.
Whoa. Oh my gosh. It's going both directions. The answer is both, and I don't know what that means. Well, and it's funny because I was just got done watching Back to the Future, where they were going forward and backward in time.
Yeah.
And I watched Back to the Future 2, which, by the way, is like not good.
I haven't watched those movies in so long, I can't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, probably from, I don't know. You just intuitively ask. I don't know. It's going like this, back and forth, energetically when you ask me.
Okay. I think something that I would like to know from you is, how did you evolve to this place in what I would say a relatively short time frame? I think some of us are under this assumption that it takes a really long time to evolve or to integrate or to explore these topics. What do you think it is about you that sort of allowed you to get here in a relatively short period of time?
I think that goes back to my childhood. Like being born to a mother who was in a initiatic mystery school. And so she was already really deeply embodied in her spiritual practices in life, and I was kind of like born into her field. And then both my parents owned health food stores, and so they were really holistic as well. So I sort of, just by being born to them, skipped having to process like religious trauma or and I kind of got to opt out of the mainstream medical and then also like the standard American diet. And so being out of those things, and also like kind of to deep dive more on the like religious programming, like my mom's fundamental belief was that like there are many like views on reality, and that like all of the religions were valid. Like, whatever you wanted to believe spiritually was valid, that there wasn't just like one truth.
Right.
And so as a child I knew that, and as an adult I still embody that like everybody is on their own path and they get to construct how their belief systems are individually. So that was really beautiful. But so when I grew up I felt like this feeling of, there's been a couple ways I've described it, but one was I felt like I was in some sort of like interim space. Like I didn't feel like I was in the mainstream culture, but I didn't feel like I was like deeply in a spiritual space either. I felt like I was some in between thing, but I didn't really know what to do with that. And my parents didn't know because I was like that because the generational, I mean, I was the first generation to be raised like that. So there was no history on what to do. So they didn't really instruct me. So I was kind of
Uh-huh.
like put into the wild with this like way of being that I tried to figure out for a very long time. And then I would construct different metaphors over time. It would be like two parallel train tracks, and I'd be like, wait, if they're parallel, how am I supposed to get to the other one? And it
Oh.
always felt like that to me. And I was like, spirituality or some sort of like understanding of God was on the other track, but I didn't seem to be able to get to it. Yet my mom was like embodied in it. So it was like a very, like this thing that I was always trying to wrestle with. And my parents were incredibly spiritual. So I grew up like with my both my parents interpreting my dreams and talking about the cosmos with me. And my mom would do like quantum visualization work with me, and we used homeopathy and like chiropractic care on like the day I was born. So I was like already fully embodied in what is now considered the premier like holistic way of living since I was
Mhm.
born, and I was born in 1981. And so then when I finally did get to the parallel, like I found a way to get to the other track, and it was definitely plant medicine. It just popped me over onto that other track. And my experience with plant medicine, like, it was just an instantaneous opening, and then I began to integrate very quickly. And then my entire life began to make sense at a really rapid rate. And I feel like a couple of journeys in, I feel like I almost downloaded a template for integrating.
Mhm.
And then I could tell because we're all individually oriented to interact with plant medicine in different ways. There is not one way. But for me, it was like I very quickly began to see that I was here to clean my vessel. It was like looking at my parts. It was doing the shadow work, and then it was like integration, and it just repeated and repeated, and I
Mhm.
just kept cleaning and cleaning and cleaning and cleaning, and I became aware of what I was doing. And then I
Mhm.
continued. And so I felt like it was really like, then I was like, "Oh, I get it." And then I
Mhm.
continued to clean.
Can you speak to the the orientation of this, right? Like, so tell me if I'm right or wrong. It's okay. But it sounds to me like because your parents were embodied in this way of living, that it's possible they didn't orient you to living outside of those constructs, like those, uh, that higher vibration, that highest vibration timeline, which I'm not saying your parents did this, but it can bypass just the earth plane. How to navigate on the earth. It sounds like you were oriented this way with light, which is how you were raised, but then we're seeking, how do I be an earth being? Like, how do I actually orient on the earth? What do I do with this light?
Yeah, and I
Like, how
guess
do I do this?
if you look back at my life like dharmically, it was like then like I had childhood and then I spent a big chunk of almost 20 years just working as an art director and creative director and commercial photographer. Like, and I like chopped wood, carried water,
Right.
and that's what I did. Like I just was a creator
Mm-hmm.
on the earth plane, not seeking.
Enlightenment.
Yes.
Yeah. So did your I'm guessing that your dad for chopped wood and gathered water. No?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was very he was earthier
Yeah.
than my mother for sure.
Yeah.
But he
I
kind of
think
had like a little bit of like Tolly vibes because when we'd go to funerals or he would talk to me about death, he had such a neutral perspective and he would teach me about reincarnation and
uh-huh.
I was like I really struggle. I was like where are the emotions? Like I was like I'm so confused. Everyone else is distraught and my dad's like, "Well," and then he would start talking about reincarnation and I tried to like grok it and it was like I started to get little pieces of that. Like,
Uh-huh.
I used to talk as a child all the time about reincarnation in grade school to people.
Oh,
I
that's so
like
funny. That's so funny. So how, like, timeline, so if we're gonna weave, right, going back and forth, like I want to take you forward now.
mhm.
And thinking about souls and how each soul is individuated and how each soul needs something different. And so it's obvious to me listening to your story that you needed another element in order to live your dharmic purpose on this planet. And you found that element by getting on the other train. You found it. So, timeline us up to today and what you're doing today, and how, even if you didn't know it back then, how all of this has woven together for you to be able to stand right here, right now,
Mhm.
doing your dharma.
Yeah, cuz I think I began to pick up like my dharmic clues probably like 5 years ago. I mean, I think it was before that, but I really was consciously aware of it. I was like, "Oh, I have a basket and I'm on a scavenger hunt." And so like I
Right.
began to like look back and be able to pull those things with me. And I knew I was doing that process. I mean, even if it was really abstractly, it became clearer and clearer and clearer. And it of course, like you don't arrive anywhere. So everything's just kind of continuously happening. But I started to gather these pieces and I could it's man, this is it's so hard to describe how you know what you're supposed to do here or like
Right.
because it's a ton of little moments in a lot of different ways. It's not just like it's in so many different messages and so many different forms that begin to happen and then little by little you begin to see more. But okay, so I was a creative director for a long time and then plant medicine, I got on this parallel train track and then from there I think because I was an athlete and because I integrated the athlete into being a creative director, and then I was able to kind of take this part of me into the spiritual space, like I already had, like I'm already innately dedicated to what I'm doing. Like I have a really, I know how to show up every day to do something. And so that just, I think, carried over. And then I'm just like really dedicated when I do something. So it's not like I did it 1 hour a day. It was like from the time I woke to the time I went to bed for years, every single moment I felt like awake and doing it, like evolving on my spiritual path.
Mm-hmm.
And so it became all encompassing for me and I was moving fast. But at the same time, I don't know, like, I was able to integrate and embody as I went. Like, I didn't feel like I was going fast and it became, like, too much.
Hmm. Do you think the fast integration came from having this foundation already set? Because as I'm listening to you, you almost lived a different reality than everyone else, because usually you are living the shadow with your parents
Mhm,
and then seeking light later. Like, you
mhm.
seek light when that opens up for you. So it's like almost as if you were living the opposite experience, where you were living the light and then seeking the shadow. And so, do you think that living in that space, in that light, and being born into it and having it be your foundational guiding posts actually helped you with the integration process at a fast speed?
Y I'm just now connecting that. Okay, so this is how I feel like it might connect. My mom was, like, working on the integration of the light feminine,
Yes.
like, the embodied light feminine, and so she had a lot of those characteristics, and so her heart space, so I can feel the purity of my mom's heart space. Like, her field of non-judgment is extremely high, which is really rare,
There.
actually.
Yes.
So, like, an extremely non-judgmental person, and really understood what actual unconditional love is.
Yes.
And so some of her characteristics, like, I would go out into the world and, like, I would observe other mothers, and my mother felt very different, and I thought, like other women were mean, because I was
Mhm.
like, because in comparison, my mom was, like, just super, like, love and light, like, and so, now I see that they were just in the middle where they should be, but, um,
Mhm.
so I think there was a that lived inside my heart,
Right.
and
That's what I'm thinking. It's like
so
I
that was
feel
in
like a
there.
guiding light for you. You had a guiding light that was fostered.
Yes, I think I held that aspect, and then I went into the work world, and then I got to experience everything, all the different layers of psychological interaction and the shadow like how you interact with other people's parts on an individual basis, in a team level, in a mentorship capacity, in a leadership team, within an organization, with interacting with other organizations. So I experienced those patterns over and over and over and in until I began to see more.
Mhm.
But yeah, because I've also, it's interesting. I've had somebody ask me, like, when did you awake? And I was like, well, I think I was born partially. I always felt like I was born partially awake, and then it was really happening my whole life. In retrospect, when I look back at even high school, college, and then in my early 20s, I was consuming information that was already working in that. Like, I mean, when I was 25, my partner at the time was studying the Kabbalah,
Yeah.
and we were when we were taking walks, we were talking about how to create a more beautiful world in my 20s. And so then, and I remember these conversations. We had this, one of my favorite conversations I had in my 20s. We were we were eating, well, I was vegetarian at the time, and he was a raw foodist, but he ate meat. And so we'd be like, okay, how do you get other people to eat healthy? And, like, he would talk to people, but people would reject his idea. So we were like, and that was the first time we realized, like, oh, you have to be the change. They don't like it when you tell them what to do. You tell them that their food's unhealthy, they're like, I don't like what you're saying. And so we were, like, starting to learn, like, the principles of just walking the path
Uh-huh.
individually. So that was kind of like, so that was like my 20s felt like I was really began to look at my personal patterns too. Like, that was really when I was like examine them, but I didn't know anything what to do with them in my 20s.
Mhm.
And then I had kids. And so that was like a big portal that I went into. And that started to decompose everything. And so through motherhood, that was like a big chunk of my journey of finding myself before I even encountered plant medicine. So it just feels like my entire life has been that, the
So
process.
your entire life has been about being somewhat of a way shower, like showing people the way. Uh, but from an evolutionary being sort of perspective. So if you think about the way that you were born, it's like you were born uh, into a space of evolution, where many people don't grow up like that. Many people. And I don't know. It's a very interesting topic for you. I mean, it feels like you're the one of your soul's purposes is definitely way showing people how to do things, showing people what you're learning and how you're integrating things. And so, one of the other questions I want to ask you, because I don't want to get off topic, is what were some of your challenges with awakening?
Well, because I didn't know till much later that I was born a way shower, I found it very confusing when I was younger. I'd be like, here's healthy water. And they'd be like, why are you drinking that? And I'm like, well, because it's healthy. And they'd be like, they would make fun of my healthy water. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to make fun of something that's healthy. That seems like objectively like a good idea to drink healthy water. And so I had so many interactions with that now what I'm experiencing, how I lived as a child has now anchored into the culture just now.
Uh-huh.
So
I
it's very
just wrote about
painful
that.
for me.
Yeah.
Very painful because I didn't when I was younger, I didn't have the relationship skills and the wordsmithing skills to articulate it. I didn't even know. I just knew that this was healthy,
Mhm.
and that this tap water, like literally there's a list of chemicals in the tap water. I'm like, well, why would you drink chemicals? I like in what universe is it healthy to drink chemicals? And people would argue with me. And I was like, and so it was hard. So I found it to be like most of my conversations were people being curious about how I lived, but then also feeling that edge of where it began to have them question themselves, where they didn't want to question it. And I always felt that edge. And I think I was always really kind about it. I was always like, you don't have to do what I do. This is just what I'm doing. You do what you do. I'm not judging you. I'm
Mhm.
just living how I live. And so I had to learn the language set for that very quickly. And I also learned to use humor as a way just to relax people, because people would be innately triggered by how I was living. And I'm like, no, 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 you do you. I do me, but I'm not going to go eat the thing at the restaurant just cuz we're going to that restaurant. And
Mhm.
people just didn't like having to make accommodations for how I lived, because I did not compromise how I lived, and I was able to hold that state my whole life. I never compromised how I was raised. Like, I didn't dip back down into eating unhealthy. I didn't go through those phases. I just held it.
Mhm. Yeah, and what is so so being raised that way was your orientation. Then it sounds like you literally held individualization, like you held it, your individual self in relationship to the collective.
Mhm.
And then also having to navigate the collective. Um, and then what do
I'm
you,
sorry to interrupt you, but this is just reminding me of a story of, like,
yeah,
I
please
mean,
tell it.
at the end of my relationship with my college boyfriend, I'm like, I said something like, "You eat pizza, I eat sushi. I want to go to art galleries." Like I was like making like this comparison. I was like,
Basically telling him, right? This
I'm
is
gonna
me.
live like this. You're living like this. These things don't go together, but I'm not gonna change. I'm not
Right.
gonna become less healthy. And so everything that I did my whole life was like, I'm gonna hold my own here.
Mhm.
and then I just walked through. Sorry, I just remember saying that, like,
Well,
"You
I
eat
mean,
pizza, I do not."
it's true, but it's like it's such a simple example of individuating, though. It's a very simple way of explaining that concept that can be hard for people because obviously some of us like to follow the collective even if we don't believe in it, even if we don't want to. It's hard to hold your pole of truth, and
Mhm.
especially when you want to be liked or you want to be uh you want someone to choose you, or you want your work to be accepted, or just all the things we encounter as humans.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it was a split for me. So I was able to hold my individuation in certain categories, but then when it came to like some of the deeper inner psychological dynamics, I did like lose myself because being in the work world, like I'm in a culture. They have values. There is all these expectations. So I was very much running like a performance script with myself. So then I had to find myself. Like I remember becoming a mother and then I started to be like my mother and I was like, "Wait, this isn't me. I'm just mimicking my mother." So then I began that process of individuating my parenting style. And
Yes.
I feel like that kind of kicked it off and then it went much further where I began to like to question who I was. But when I began to express more of my authentic self, it wasn't received like with open arms in any kind of work environment because to individuate, you really, I mean, I don't I don't know if you really can fully individuate when you're like when you're existing within a work culture which has a very specific set of rules
Right.
and values because you have to self-abandon to be into that space.
Mhm.
And so when I realized that, I began to individuate really deeply until it was like I felt like I had two steel rods just pushing against each other. There's so much pressure.
Mhm.
I was like, and then I left because I couldn't take one more second.
Mhm.
And then I had this huge freeing of myself. And then it really sped up because I was free from having to dip in and out of something that wasn't mine.
Mhm. Yeah. And now I want to talk about just in relationship to your life, what it's like on the path to meet other people that are resonating with you or clicking with you. Because I think about the first time I met you, you know, I can clearly remember that night. You came in, you brought your own food because you didn't want to eat the food that was being served. You had your own water. Um, you made uh, requests for sleeping accommodations. Um, very much taking care of yourself in a bigger pool of people. And so just kind of tell me about that, like meeting other people on your path that you actually click with. And what is that like for you? You know, yeah, you being Indigo, what's that like?
Hmm. Um, I think it was really enlivening when I first left my job because it was suddenly people were able to meet me in much more expanded states of consciousness. And that's so beautiful. And that was like so satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And then it like, like anything, it evolves. And I think that for me, when I think of who I connect with, it has to do with the makeup of their consciousness and the way they like want to express and play and create and all of that. And there's no, I just know it's abstract, you know?
Mhm. So you
It,
feel it. You
Yeah,
feel the
and
connection?
yes, I think, and it to me where I'm at, like it's I'm really focused on dharmic. I'm at dharmic
Mhm.
connections where there's creation because
Mhm.
I'm just creating all the time. So in that space, it's like creativity being the highest pillar, and then how you weave creativity with the soul and the psyche and the consciousness. Like there's just this that's what I look for when I'm figuring out if I resonate with somebody.
Yeah, let's talk about I like this segue into you as a dharma artist. Like you so we talked about your history, we talked about your shadow, we talked about encountering your shadow. We talked about your relationships. What is it like to be you at work? I mean, what inspired you to want to teach these principles, to walk the walk, to be of service in this way? And I want to speak to it in terms of like what inspires you, but also where you saw the holes. Like, where is there a hole? So, inspiration, and then what was the hole? Like what are people missing, basically? I want you to talk about both of those buckets.
Yeah, so when I was 16, I was driving to high school with my mom, and a couple times I would cry in the car, and I would say to her, "What do all the people on our street do? Like, you know how badly I want to knock on their door? I want to know their life story. How did they get to what do they do? How did they get to where they want to be?" I was so upset. Of course, hormones, 16, I was crying about it. Like, and I was so curious about everybody on our street. And I was like, we don't know any of the people. And in retrospect, that was like showing me something that's very key to me, which is that I have an incredibly high amount of curiosity for the human experience in humans.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew this a long time ago, but I have an insane amount of capacity to hold space. So I could probably hold space for 4 to 6 hours just straight, dropped in, and not disassociate. And so my ability to drop deep and hold like is most people get worn out and before are like, and and so there was something there. And it was like when I would get into deep conversations, I knew that that was the pocket I wanted to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I had an opportunity to train to become a coach, um because I had so much previous experience as a creative director, I was able to integrate a large amount of information over from that space because I'm managing projects, teams, mentoring people, being on a leadership, all those things like integrated over. I had been working through like conscious business principles with through myself for like years.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of moved over. And so when I became a coach, it was like I felt like 10 years went by in less than 2 year span.
Mm-hmm.
It was very quick and I just dropped in and I was immediately like, oh my gosh, like coach, guide, space holder, medicine woman, whatever you want to call it, psycho spiritual coach. That is what I'm here to. I mean, it's so clear. If you ask me if you could just do one thing the rest of your life and not get paid for it, I'd be like, coach. Like I would just scream it out because
Mm-hmm.
space holder. It's space holder. Um and And I knew a long time ago that I wanted to work at the root of everything because, from a health perspective, I understood functional medicine. I understood how to go to the root. And through my journey, though, I I I struggled for a long time with people wanting things from me when I felt like my cup wasn't full enough.
Oh,
Like
yes.
and and so I never played out that very very typical like caregiver or martyr archetype. Like I didn't help people for to feel a certain way about myself. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel like I could help people before. I'm like, hold up, hold up. I knew intuitively in my 20s I couldn't help people until I had found myself. I was like, no, like I understood the orientation for wanting to be of service from like an embodied way. Like I understood that. So I knew I was working towards that a really long time ago.
Yeah, knowing yourself different from the people that you're serving, which
Yeah,
is key, which is a key element.
yeah, because I thought like there was this one point in my journey, I'm like, I want to save the world. I was like, maybe I should make whale posters. And then I was looking at nonprofit work and I was like, they're burnt out. They're burning out. Like these people are screaming and burning out. I was like, that's not the root. And I was like, what's the root? I wish I could remember the day that this dropped in, but I was like, oh, how do we collectively become free and evolve? The root is to
Mhm.
work with the individual to connect them back to their soul. And when I knew that, I was like, that's where I'm supposed to be, because that's the root of all evolution. And so therefore, when that dropped in a long time ago, and then I was like, okay. And then I was really dedicated to learning my craft in a way that I knew would be the infinity loop, that it would be not burning me out. And so I have been able to do that. My work does not burn me out. It
Mhm.
fills me up.
Yes.
And I was like, I don't give because I feel like it it is not from that martyr place
So that's one of your
whatsoever.
key that's one of your key codes, like to find, or to not even find joy, to be joy in your dharma, to feel good about that. To wake up joyfully, to create great art, to feel confident in that, you know? I feel like that's
Mhm.
one of your gifts. I was thinking, like, I'd love to know when you felt like your gifts were coming online, like your celestial gifts. When did you start realizing that you were more than just the creative director, or you were more than just the earth? Maybe even swinging back to your childhood too. Like, so you went from this place of understanding the universe, right? From your parents, then into the shadow, and then when did all of that start integrating for you, when you realized, oh, these are my celestial gifts? This is what I'm here to do. Like, I'm starting to understand myself on this level. I'm beyond, there's more to me than just the getting up and working every day.
Yeah. It probably happened it probably started everything on my path has been a slow burn. Like it started a long time ago,
Right.
and it actually, so even though it was like there's a part of my journey that feels quick, it actually has been this really long slow burn for me. And so it was books and podcasts, because I was working 8 hours a day listening to spiritual podcasts.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So I did that for like a decade. And
But
so
what
I was
what brought you there, though? Like, did you just stumble upon a podcast that you really liked, or like,
um
how did that door open?
I think it started in this, like it began to cross over. So I think it began at like Tim Ferriss, Rogan, like some
Uh-huh.
of the in more like the CrossFit nutritional like biohacking space.
Okay.
And then by the nature of some of their journeys, like Tim started to go on a plant medicine journey. So some of his guests and in the guests that I would come across on podcasts, I would start to follow those rabbit holes, right? So then it started to open for me as well. And but also just, I mean, it was also woven through because I mean, when I was 24, 25, my partner's best friend was meditating every day with the Merkaba.
Mhm.
And he was meditating like hours a day or something. So, and then I knew, I mean, just from, I was really into alternative stuff. I was constantly going down alternative rabbit holes.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, like just on the internet too. And I mean, I knew McKenna in my early 20s and I'm in my mid 40s. And I knew I would do ayahuasca. And it took me 15 years to finally go do ayahuasca. So that stuff was kind of just in my consciousness,
Mhm.
sitting there waiting for the right time.
Right. Don't you find that
Yeah.
interesting? I
Yes.
feel like your soul is always right there and you know it's there. I've had many people tell me this. It's not time. It's not time. They know it's there though.
Yes. And you know, and even part of, I mean, so going through the initiations and the study and the embodiment of becoming like a guide, there's been so many like moments that were like initiatory. So I had this one where I integrated my mother's codes. I was like ready. Suddenly it made sense, like everything. And I began to look at her books, and then that came online for me.
Hmm. I remember
When,
that when that was happening.
yeah, so we go through all of these pretty wild initiations and openings and expansions in consciousness, and they're like, for me, they were just like one after another that
Hmm.
I've been through. And it just opens more.
What is it that makes you say yes to something? So like if you get the intuitive nudge, what is it that actually tips you over to saying yes, I'll do that?
uh I know it's more than one thing, but the one thing that stands out to me was in sports, I had no fear to go first. I would kick the ball first. I would always go for it. And I took all of the like penalty kicks in high school and college. So I was willing to take the risk. And I happened to score every single penalty kick for 8 years straight, which is a
Oh,
really
dang.
weird streak to have, but and that kind of like, it definitely shows you how incredibly dedicated I am to craft at a
Yes.
young age. My dad was like, I used to joke my dad was like Tiger Woods' dad or something. You know, he was
Mhm.
like, "You want to kick the ball again?" And I was like, "Again and again and again and again." And we'd be like practicing on the weekend again and again and again. And it would be like perfecting craft. It was like one of his things,
Mhm.
pillars. So um I have that deeply, I think that I have that deeply embedded in me.
Mhm. Oh, that's wonderful. That's beautiful. Um, I don't think I have any other what question do you wish I would have asked you that I didn't ask you?
I know, because it's I guess like
Like what do you want to say?
um well, I feel like there's so much that it's really wild to talk about your life, because there's thousands of hours of recording that could happen.
Mhm.
And I think I think I would say that there's been three major phases. Um there is my creative director phase,
Mhm.
then there is becoming a psycho spiritual coach
Mhm.
and guide, and then there's being a dharma artist, and which is kind of an umbrella above all of those, but
Right.
it's almost, it actually, it is, it's not kind of, but then I could say more like becoming an artist again, like an individual artist. um that is that I am like, but I am here to I'm here braving to affect the collective with my art.
Mhm. Yes.
Not necessarily for my own internal alchemy, even though I do. I have an orientation towards that. Um, and in what I do as a coach, I feel like I have integrated all of these aspects into one now. And so helping people is a very diverse lands. I work in a very diverse landscape. And then in working through the fundamental operating system that exists below a human being, which an operating system is an interesting term because it's very abstract, but it could be from parts work to the shadow work to the cosmology to really understanding their dharmic story and their celestial self, right? Their cosmic channel all the way to helping them
The
on
roots.
the, yeah, all the way down to the roots, which is the 3D.
Right.
And so it's been, I haven't quite figured out how to like succinctly talk about what I do but in a nutshell, I would say that the most ideal way for me to work is to help somebody orient towards creation, towards either individuating, which is like to actualize their own self, their own blueprint,
Right.
to connect back to their soul, to express their authenticity into the world, or actually doing a project. And maybe that is having their gifts come shared with the world, or maybe it's starting a business, right? Maybe it's writing a book, like whatever that they're doing that's actually physical.
Right.
And
Along with the celestial.
yeah, so there's an orientation towards that. And then when they begin to move that way, I'm helping guide them through all of the internal reworking that is needed to expand, to illuminate their light, to connect further to their soul, which is like, actually, it sounds abstract, but I don't think it is, because most people, if they come to me and they want to actualize something, I have such a big history for actualizing projects. So as a creative mentor, there feels like I can't think of a barrier that can't be overcome that I don't have like wisdom in. And so I'm
Or
very proficient at that, which
uh-huh.
makes me super happy inside, because being able to integrate my past work into the present in this space of connecting to soul and, walking the dharmic path is like such the most beautiful integrative journey that I've been on.
Yeah. So you've been working on all these pieces, the pieces of you that is allowing you to stand here today and deliver the service.
Yeah, and it feels like I'm able to deliver it with ease,
Yeah.
which is so great, because I lived in this chronic overworking state as a creative director, and now I get to like, my work is easeful. Okay, I just thought of one other way to say it. So, okay, so for people that are wanting to expand out and like listen to the whisper, connect to spirituality or their gifts, or they're like, okay, I know my gifts, but I really want to embody them, and I want to bring them down, and I want to have like actual offerings, right?
Right.
So the person, I help them open,
Yes.
and I'm a bridge to higher states of consciousness.
Yes.
But if you're already have accessed those higher states of consciousness, I'm a bridge to the ground.
Yes.
A hardcore bridge to the ground, because I existed in 3D creation of art for so long. And so in really grounding what it means too. So there's like a lot of translating going both directions that I do, so that people can really live the life that their soul's encoded to live.
Yeah. Because we have that language in us. We're oriented to it the whole time.
Yeah.
So bringing it down, like bringing it from the celestial, is really valuable, but also understanding what you do with yourself once you're bringing it in. And that's also valuable.
Yeah. And we'll definitely have to do a part 2, because there's so much to talk about when it comes to like the reading as a guide, like the ability to read, like our gifts, like as a medicine woman, is very abstract, very esoteric, and it's a really deep journey, and there's a lot of layers to it, and there's a lot of work that goes into honing the craft, and it is a daily dedication to honing that craft daily. All day long, it's weaving in and out of honing this craft. And
Yes, talk a little bit about what that weaving looks like. Like just simply, like,
Yeah.
meaning the language comes down from the celestial, then it hits the body, then I think about me and technology, for example, like trying to be visible, but yet having to deal with the technology piece, which I don't understand, which stops me from being visible. So it's talk through that, just talk through that process of what that weaving actually looks like that you're doing all day as it relates to getting your art out, getting your craft out.
Yeah. Yeah, it really spans from the furthest reaches out all the way down to like what size a file has to be to upload a YouTube cover banner.
Right. Or even how to do the YouTube cover banner.
Yeah. Yeah, and because I was a creative director, graphic designer for so long, like when it comes to graphic design, photography, web creation, newsletter sign, like all the things, like I've done all those throughout my whole career.
Hmm.
And so I love helping people with that stuff because it comes as second nature to me because I did it every day for 20 years. And I'm grateful for that now, even though I was, at the time I wanted to evolve out of it. But now I'm like, wow, good thing I did that. Because now I can produce as much as I want, which is feels really freeing because to get stuck there can be very frustrating because you're really having to come face to face with parts and the shadow. And so there is not an aspect here of what we do that isn't spiritual. So, like if someone's triggered by tech, it is you're on a spiritual journey right
Right.
there. If you're trying to set an
Most
intention and you're having a hard time, that is parts work. It is. And
definitely.
and so it doesn't matter what form it comes in, it's happening. And I think the dedication to the craft is that it's like a dedication to your own inner work and being able to see it and to
Live.
continually
You
evolve.
you see it live.
Live. Uh,
Yeah.
yes,
Well, it's you
100%.
see it live and it's alive.
Yes,
uh,
and it's a lot because it starts with, like, I think I'll do medicine journeys, it opens up enough that you're like, "Oh, I feel like I'm on a medicine journey without the medicine," and then you're like,
mhm.
"Okay, I don't why would I need extra?" You're like, "This is talking all the time," and then but, it gets I think a little bit easier, I don't know, or I just really like weaving humor into it, and then it makes it easier, or I don't know.
I think it does get easier because you understand the process. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
some people don't understand the process. Like
Mhm.
the information comes in from the celestial and then it goes into your crown and it goes into your body and it does produce a outcome that you have to either overcome or align with or integrate with, but it's the same process over and over. The process never changes. It's just that
Yeah.
most people aren't aware there's a process.
Yeah, yeah, because if I fundamentally believe that the universe is talking to me all the time, that change is inevitable,
Yes.
and that I'm evolving all the time. So then in that, it's like if I allow that to happen, then it's just less tension. Then I'm
Right.
floating down the river and I'm not trying to like hold on to the shore.
Right. Or even act like there's no river.
Yeah.
There's a river.
Yeah. There sure is.
There's a river.
Yeah. That's a good place to stop. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Uh-huh.
It's
You're
good
welcome.
chatting with you today.